Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. Ready for another deep dive into global headlines with me?
Let's do it. Always up for unpacking the latest world news, you know?
Before we get into it all, though, tell me what's new with you. I feel like it's been forever since we just chatted.
You know, besides getting ready for this, I actually went and tried that new bubble tea place you told me about last time.
Oh yeah, I told you the mango green tea is amazing.
It was so good.
It really is the best in the city.
Definitely is.
Speaking of the best, though, we have got some pretty wild stories to cover today, from like market meltdowns to political power plays. It has been a crazy week. And honestly, one story in particular feels straight out of a spy novel. But we'll get to that a bit later because we've got 10 big stories to sip and talk about. So let's dive right in.
Okay, sounds good.
So let's start with something that probably hit everyone pretty hard. The global stock market. Remember last week when it seemed like everything was just going up, up, up? Yeah, well, this week decided to throw us a curveball.
You're talking about Trump's sudden tariff move on Mexico and Canada?
Exactly. A 25% tariff just like that. Yeah. Can you imagine family Thanksgiving dinners after that bombshell? I swear everyone at the gym was glued to their phones, checking their portfolios and wondering if they should start stockpiling canned goods.
Yeah, the markets definitely went a little haywire. But before we get into all of that, it's important to understand why these tariffs were even a possibility in the first place. So officially, they were aimed at tackling illegal immigration and trying to slow down that flow of fentanyl coming across the border. Of course, this has sparked a lot of debate about whether tariffs are the right way to go about solving this problem.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the huge pushback we saw from the auto industry giants like Ford, GM, and Stellantis. They basically said, hold on, this is going to destroy us. They argued that these tariffs would make their cars so much less competitive, and that could lead to, job losses and price hikes.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The Tax Foundation, that independent tax policy research group, they ran the numbers and their projections were pretty scary if these tariffs were to become permanent. They said that the U.S. GDP could shrink by 0.2%. We could lose over 200,000 jobs, and the average person's income could drop by like $600 a year.
Wait. $600? That's like my entire monthly budget for avocado toast and fancy coffee. I'm already feeling the economic anxiety creeping in.
Well, hold on to your lattes, because here's where it gets really wild. You remember all that chaos and panic I was just talking about? Well, it turns out that those tariffs got a 1-month delay just days after they were announced.
Seriously?
Yeah.
They caused a global freak out, and then they just hit the pause button. Talk about mixed signals. What was the thought process behind that?
Well, it seems like all that pressure from industry leaders and the potential for economic disaster forced them to rethink. But guess what? This delay actually caused even more instability in the market. It's like everyone was bracing for impact, and then suddenly they had to recalibrate.
So instead of one big crash, it's like a bunch of mini earthquakes. Ouch, this whole tariff thing really goes to show just how connected the world is. One decision in one country can cause huge issues across the globe.
For sure. And it really makes you wonder about the long-term effects this is going to have on global trade and relationships. But enough about economics for now. You mentioned a story that felt like it came out of a spy novel. I'm definitely interested in hearing more about that.
Oh, you're going to love this one. Let's switch gears and head over to Eastern Europe, where things are heating up between Ukraine and Russia. You ready?
I'm ready. Fill me in.
Okay, so picture this. Ukraine is in talks with the U.S. about a deal that involves rare earth minerals. It sounds kind of boring, right? But here's the kicker. This mineral deal is being presented as a possible way to get peace talks going with Russia.
Wait, minerals equal peace talks. Now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
So it seems like Trump sees this mineral deal as a way to get something concrete in return for all the aid that the U.S. has been giving to Ukraine. He wants access to these valuable minerals. We're talking things like lithium and cobalt, which are really important for all sorts of, high-tech things and defense systems.
So this is about securing those crucial resources. I can see how that makes sense strategically, but I'm guessing it's not really that simple.
You're right, on the money. It's a huge chess game with extremely high stakes. Ukraine wants Russia to pull out all their troops. They want war crime trials for those responsible for, the terrible things that have happened, and they want guarantees that they'll be safe in the future. Russia, on the other hand, wants to keep the territory that they've already taken, and they want to stop Ukraine from joining NATO, which is a big no-no for them.
It doesn't really sound like either side is willing to budge. How are these peace talks even supposed to get started with such different goals?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But it gets even more interesting because there was this sudden push for peace talks right after Trump and Putin had a phone call. Nobody knows exactly what they talked about, but it definitely raised some eyebrows.
A secret phone call, a potential mineral deal, and a conflict that has been going on for years. It does sound like a high-stakes thriller. It makes you wonder what's really happening behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And it really makes you realize that global politics can sometimes feel a lot like a poker game, with each player trying to outsmart the other.
That's a perfect way to put it. But speaking of games, how about we take a little break from this heavy stuff? I could use a mental palate cleanser right about now.
Perfect timing. I was just thinking about our friend Micky and his amazing YouTube channel, Mickeytolife. Remember him? He's got those incredible original songs, and he used to post the coolest travel vlogs.
Oh, yeah, Micky. He is super talented. I loved his travel adventure. Classic.
I know, right? I wonder when he'll start posting those travel videos again. I miss seeing the world through his eyes.
Me too. But hey, at least we can enjoy his music in the meantime. How about we play a quick track before we jump into the next headline?
Sounds good to me. It's the perfect soundtrack for our deep dive into world events.
Okay, that was a great song.
I know, right? It really gets you in the mood to talk about world events.
For sure.
Speaking of world events, let's move on over to the East China Sea, where things are always a little bit, well, tense. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
China and Taiwan, it seems like it's always something.
It's definitely a complicated and sensitive situation, and this week there's a new development that really highlights those tensions. So China has always maintained that Taiwan is part of China. They don't recognize Taiwan as a separate country, and this week they really made that clear.
Okay, I'm listening. What happened?
Well, there's this woman named Lu Zenya who lives in Taiwan, and she's been getting a lot of attention online for her pro-China posts on TikTok.
Wait, really TikTok?
Yeah, I know what you're thinking, TikTok. Seriously. But social media has a lot of power in global politics these days.
So someone's TikTok post can actually cause international problems. That's crazy. What was she even posting about?
She had a lot of followers, almost 400,000 people, and she was openly saying that China should take control of Taiwan by force, basically using TikTok as her own personal platform to spread pro-China propaganda.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
I guess you could say she went viral for all the wrong reasons. So what happened? Did TikTok ban her account?
It wasn't actually TikTok that took action. It was the Taiwanese government. They revoked her residency permit, which she had gotten through marriage, because she violated laws about cross-strait relations. And get this, they're even planning to deport her.
Wow, deportation over TikTok posts. That's a first. So is this like a freedom of speech thing, or is there more to it?
It's definitely a tricky situation. On one hand, you could say that she has the right to express her opinions, even if they're controversial. But on the other hand, Taiwan sees this as a direct threat to their independence. They're saying we're not going to put up with foreign interference, especially through social media.
It makes you think about how powerful social media really is. I mean, we know it can be a force for good, but this just shows how it can also be used to spread bad ideas and influence things in the political world.
It's a double-edged sword for sure. But let's step back for a second and look at the bigger picture here. This situation really highlights the ongoing struggle for power between China and Taiwan. It's a fight that's happening on so many levels, political, economic, and now more and more online.
It's like a real-life drama unfolding right in front of us. Makes you wonder what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. But before we get too deep into all the ins and outs of the whole China-Taiwan situation, why don't we take a quick look at some other big headlines happening around the world? I've got a bunch of quick updates for you, covering everything from crazy weather to political shakeups.
All right, hit me with it. My brain is ready for some rapid-fire news.
Okay, first up, we've got a huge storm brewing in the United States. We're talking blizzards in some areas, tornadoes in others, and even a high risk of wildfires in certain regions.
Wow, that's a lot for one storm to handle. It sounds like people are going to need their snow boots, tornado shelters, and fire extinguishers all at the same time.
Talk about a wild weather event. And while we're on the topic of unexpected things, there's a lot of concern about Pope Francis's health. He's been in the hospital for 3 weeks now with pneumonia and has had to cancel a bunch of public appearances.
Oh, wow. I didn't hear about that. He's been such an important voice on the global stage, advocating for social justice and environmental protection. I hope he makes a full recovery.
Me too, fingers crossed. Now let's switch gears and go to South Asia, where there's a really scary hostage situation happening in Pakistan. A group of terrorists have taken control of a train with at least 400 people on board, and negotiations are still going on. It's an extremely delicate and dangerous situation, and the world is watching closely, hoping for a peaceful resolution.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what those passengers and their families are going through. It's a reminder of the dangers that are out there in the world.
It really is. But on a brighter note, there's some political news coming out of Canada. Mark Carney, a well-known figure in the finance world, has just been elected as their new prime minister.
Oh, that's interesting. I know he's got a ton of experience in international finance. What kind of impact do you think he'll have on Canada?
Well, he's known for focusing on economic stability and has a reputation for being pretty careful with money. It'll be interesting to see how his policies affect Canada's relationship with the U.S., especially considering all the trade tension we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, for sure. Any other big political changes happening around the world?
Actually, yeah, there's an interesting development up north in Greenland. They just had snap elections, and it looks like there might be a shift away from U.S. influence. This could be a big deal for Greenland's autonomy and independence movement.
Wow, a political earthquake in the Arctic. It seems like change is happening everywhere.
You got that right. And speaking of change, we need to talk about a public health issue that's unfortunately making a comeback in the United States. Measles. There's a big outbreak happening right now with almost 200 cases in West Texas and another 30 in New Mexico.
Measles. Seriously. I thought we'd gotten rid of that.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it's making a comeback because of low vaccination rates in some communities. This outbreak really shows how important vaccines and public health measures are in stopping the spread of diseases.
Absolutely. Vaccines are one of the most important ways we can protect ourselves and the people around us.
Exactly. And lastly, let's wrap up our quick news roundup with a story from Syria. The new government there has said that they'll investigate the mass killings that took place during the civil war. It's a move that people are reacting to with both hope and skepticism.
I can understand that, considering all the horrible things that happened there. It'll be interesting to see if this investigation actually leads to anyone being held responsible.
It's a situation we'll definitely keep an eye on. That was a lot of news in a short amount of time.
I know, right? I feel like I need another sip of my drink to let all that sink in.
Me too. The world never stops, does it?
Wow, we have covered so much in this deep dive. Tariffs messing with the global economy, a mineral deal that could lead to peace talks in Ukraine, and even TikTok becoming like a battleground for political influence. It's been wild.
It really has, and it's a good reminder that even though these things might seem really far away, they can still affect us.
So true. It's like we're all connected by these invisible strings. And when something happens on one side of the world, it can pull on those strings and change things on the other side. What really stuck out to you from everything we talked about?
You know, I think it's amazing how complicated and connected everything is becoming. Think about it. A storm in the U.S. can mess up supply chains and affect markets around the world. A social media post in Taiwan can cause a huge international incident. And a phone call between two world leaders can completely change a conflict that's been going on for years. It's mind-blowing when you think about all the different things that are happening at the same time.
It makes you think about the butterfly effect, right? One tiny thing can cause a huge chain reaction. And it makes you wonder, how do we even begin to understand this crazy world? How do we figure out what's important with all this information coming at us?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think it starts with staying informed, being curious, and having good conversations like the one we're having right now. We need to be willing to look past the headlines and think about different points of view. We also need to be critical thinkers, questioning what we think we know and digging deeper to understand what's really going on and what could happen because of these events.
Well said. It's easy to feel overwhelmed with all the news that's constantly being thrown at us. But I think you're right. Staying curious and involved is really important. And who knows, maybe by talking about these things and connecting the dots, we can actually start to find ways to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
I like that idea. It might sound a little too optimistic, but I really do believe that knowledge is power. The more we understand about the world and how it works, the better we'll be able to make good decisions and make a positive impact.
I totally agree. So to everyone listening, keep asking questions. Keep learning and keep talking about these things. You never know. Maybe you'll be the one to come up with that big solution we've all been waiting for.
Exactly. And remember, even though the world can feel like a chaotic and overwhelming place, it's also full of amazing things and possibilities. There's always something new to discover, something new to learn, and always a reason to have hope.
I love that. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey through global headlines. We hope you learned something new, maybe see things a little differently, and even had a few laughs along the way.
It's been great diving deep with you all.
And remember, stay curious, stay informed, and keep sipping and talking. We'll see you next week for another deep dive into the most interesting stories happening around the world. Cheers.